You know I've raved about Outer before, and I love my Outer sofa, outdoor dining table, and chairs. I've had them for over a year, and let me tell you, they've been through everything, from rainstorms to scorching sun, and still look brand new.
That's because Outer makes outdoor furniture that's actually designed for the outdoors. From using incredibly durable and sustainable materials to developing innovative solutions like the Outer Shell cover, which protects my sofa and dining table against dust, debris, and dirt. No more soggy cushions or dusty tabletops. My Outer setup is always clean, dry, and ready to be enjoyed anytime I want.
Head to liveouter.com/thefounderhour to see Outer's range of outdoor furniture, fire pits, and accessories. The Founder Hour listeners get an exclusive 10% off for a limited time. Terms and conditions apply.
So elevate your outdoor space with Outer. That's liveouter.com/thefounderhour. All right. Well, Joe Kudla, welcome to the pod. Appreciate you being here.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
Excited to just dive in and learn about you and then also everything you're doing with VEE-YOUR-EE these days. So let's take it back a little bit and just kind of learn about your early life and sort of where you come from. I know you sort of grew up around Washington in that area. So tell us about, your early life and what you were like as a kid.
Yeah, it's funny. Like, I grew up on a little island called Vashon Island. It was right off the coast of Seattle in the Puget Sound. And it was like a little 7-by-7 mile island. It had one little stoplight on it. It was a little blinking light. And so it was just very rural. And so I grew up outside. I was just always outside running around. I was a really shy kid, actually. And I kind of got my confidence through sports. At one point, the teachers told my parents that I needed to learn a trade or something because I couldn't sit still in class. They, this is before the wave of ADHD diagnoses, but for my parents, it was very clear, there was something going on, with my attention span. I mean, I was just very hyperactive, and they suggested that I try something to help me through that. My parents kind of, didn't want me to go that route. I'm so grateful they didn't. I just had to learn how to channel my energy, and sports for me was the way that I did that. And it kind of really got me out of my shell. I started playing football when I was pretty young. I naturally excelled at that. And that gave me a lot of confidence. It helped me to build friends and then kind of the rest was history. I ended up playing sports but the rest of my life. But one of the things that I think is worth noting about my childhood is I come from a really, I guess now I've learned to really appreciate my parents and the way that I was raised, but it was very alternative. And so, as a kid growing up, you just kind of want to fit in. And I came from a pretty different family, and that it almost developed a complex, but I'm, again, so grateful for that upbringing because it just, I think, gave me a lot of maybe the confidence or just what I needed in terms of support to go out and become an entrepreneur and choose this path and venture into the uncertain.
Joe, can you describe what that upbringing was, or what was so alternative about it?
Yeah, absolutely. So my mother was, studied Native American spirituality. She was a therapist, but she would lead women's groups, and they would go and do vision quests. So they would prepare for 6 months, and then they would go out into the wilderness and fast and live kind of in isolation for a week at a time. And that's just one of the things. My mom was a deep seeker. And so I was just around a very unique set of values around the household. When I was 18 and I moved to San Diego for college, my mom, who was then remarried, sailed from Washington State to Micronesia and ended up spending, the previous 25 years of my life in Micronesia working and living amongst indigenous tribes and just learning their way of life, learning about their spirituality. She's just always been on a path, and she's a writer, she's a student of life, but never followed a traditional path. My father was a very interesting human. He studied engineering at the University of Columbia, And in his senior year, he dropped out because, he realized that being an engineer was his dad's dream for him. It wasn't his. And he had a fascination with the body's ability to heal itself naturally. And so he ended up becoming a naturopathic doctor. He was one of the first licensed acupuncturists in the state of Washington. And, so I grew up with patients coming to our house, and getting acupuncture treatments. My dad was an astrologist. And so I had two very unique parents that were like deep, passionate students of life. And we like valuing money or career was never really like the primary value in my home. It was always about, are you following your curiosities? Like, are you making a difference in the world? Are you living are you living the life that you set out to live? And I think my parents through, they never put any pressure on me, but just naturally through assimilating into that family, it gave me a confidence to go out there and do something maybe a little bit different and take risks in my career.
And so, you mentioned being into sports, and then I think I read that you were an accounting major in college. Was that because you saw like a path in accounting and you wanted to like long-term be an accountant, or did you feel like it was just a good subject to study, but then, you could apply that to obviously being an entrepreneur and a business owner?
Yeah, I was naturally good with numbers. I think that was my dad's engineer mind showing up. But I was naturally good at math. And so I took an intro to accounting class, and, I did well. And the teacher just encouraged me to pursue accounting. But, I go back to, again, the way I was raised. I was raised in a family that didn't really have a lot of material wealth. Like, we weren't a wealthy family. I was raised largely by a single mom after my parents split. And I think it was important to me to learn how to generate income. Like, I wanted to be successful. And, when we moved away from Bellevue in middle school, when we moved away from Vashon in middle school, we moved to this town called Bellevue. And Bellevue became really popular because Microsoft was from that area. And it became a very affluent town while I was there. And, through sports, I was hanging out with a lot of kids that had, just a lot of means. They were taking like exciting vacations for spring break, doing all these kinds of things, always having new gear, boats in the summer to go wakeboarding on and all this stuff. And that was kind of my social circle. And so when I was in college, I wanted to study business because I thought it was going to be important to me to make money, or to understand or have that experience, to understand what it would be like to have some material wealth and be able to go out and live that type of lifestyle. So anyway, I was studying business. I was good at numbers. And I had a professor that encouraged me to pursue accounting.
So, Joe, it's interesting, a lot of founders we, talk with, they talk about, we had a passion for X or a passion for Y or a passion for Z. And, I love hearing, that, hey, we didn't have money. Wealth wasn't something that we were necessarily used to. And that's something that I sought to make, right? Like, not necessarily that was the only thing that, was on your mind, but that was top of mind. Do you feel as though, and I know you've had a long entrepreneurial journey and that you're still on it, but do you feel as though that mindset helps, that making money, right, is important?
It's interesting because my path post-college was very much oriented around that early in my career. I started a business because we had an opportunity to create something that I thought we could do well financially. And it was a financial success. It was a financial recruiting and consulting company that I started with a couple partners. And, we got accolades for being the third fastest growing private company in San Diego. We had probably at our height a couple hundred employees. And, I was like 7 years into this business and I was doing great. I had a lot of disposable income. I had free time, but I was totally miserable. Like, when I really started to check in, and this is where my family values really started to show up. People talk about a midlife crisis or your Saturn return when you're around 30. And it's like, if you're living a life that isn't fully aligned with kind of who you are, that can start to show up for you in different ways. And for me, I was dating the wrong people. I was like out of relationships, probably going out and partying too much, like just wasn't super fulfilled with the life that I was living. And I always felt like, when I closed my eyes and when I was in meditation, I was like, I just feel like I know that there's something bigger for me. And like what I learned once I got some disposable income was that money was clearly not what was going to make me happy. Like it was so obvious. And that was really empowering for me, because as soon as I knew that, I was like, okay, like now I'm on a quest for clarity. Like, what is it that is my life's purpose? I'm going to go out and be really intentional about seeking that out. And that journey ultimately led me to VEE-YOUR-EE. So yeah, money, like realizing that money wasn't important was actually the unlock for me.
Yeah. It's interesting. I think around that age, especially, you're already kind of into your career a little bit. You've made some money. You've designed a lifestyle for yourself, like whether it's the things that you do on a daily basis or the people you spend time with or things like that. And so, I can imagine it's really difficult to just completely, go in a different direction at that point. Right. And so was there something that happened? Like, was there like a moment or something that happened to you that you're like, whoa, like this is not the path that I want to be on, and I need to switch things up a little bit?
I think it was just, I've always been like a pretty radiant person. Like I've always been happy. And, as a young kid, I was a big dreamer. And then all of a sudden, you find yourself in your 30s and you're like, gosh, I'm working all day long. I'm going out on the weekends, rinse and repeat the following week. I'm like, is this what I want for my life? For me, it wasn't enough. Like I wanted to create something and make a bigger impact in the world. I wasn't super clear on what it was. What was interesting was like, here I was a former CPA, but I was really like trapped in the mind of a creative. I've never taken an art class. Like I was, quote unquote, a jock growing up. I played all these sports and I went on to play lacrosse in college, and I'd never taken the time to like nurture a creative bone in my body. I never took an art class. I was just too busy, like either working out or playing sports or being active and being in my physical body, which is still very important to me. The idea of me being an artist was just, it felt like so foreign to me, but there was definitely a side to me that wanted to express that within me. And so, my journey to VEE-YOUR-EE is an interesting path, and we kind of skipped around a little bit in terms of my career. But when I first graduated from college, the day that I graduated, I ended up moving to Milan in Italy, and I went there to work in the fashion industry for what was supposed to be 4 months. I was going to go there. I was going to work as a model. I was there for the fashion shows. It was a really unique opportunity. I had never been to Europe, and I just wanted to travel abroad and see the world. And when I got there, I got exposed to all these people all around the world. And, I was traveling on the weekends. It was just very, very inspiring for me. And so what was supposed to be a summer job, I was supposed to come back, start my career at this big CPA firm in the fall. I ended up asking the firm if I could just defer my start date by, kind of an unspecified amount of time. And I ended up spending 2 years traveling and working in the fashion industry. And that to me was really transformative, because I realized I didn't like being a model. I wasn't great at being in front of the camera. But I loved watching designers build product and tell stories. And, that was like an aha moment for me, because when I got home and I went back to work, I got my job at a CPA firm. I immediately started an apparel brand out of the garage. And it was, I was so naive at the time. I was so young, but I just dove in. Like I would drive to LA on the weekends. We'd buy fabric. We'd work with local pattern makers and sewing facilities to make up garments. And then we'd go sell them to little boutiques on the weekends. And, it was a very naive little business. But I learned how to make apparel. And, after 2 years, I realized that wasn't going to go anywhere. I closed it. And then I started a second apparel brand, taking all the lessons I learned from that one. I poured my heart into a second apparel brand, and maybe it had a little bit more success, but we ran into the financial crisis in 2007. And, at that point, I decided to close that business, and I was 0 for 2. But, you can see the theme here. Like I was really vested in wanting to make product, to design clothing for a living. It was really, I don't know why, it just always spoke to me. I just loved product. I loved building things. And ultimately that gave me kind of some history and a little bit of confidence to go out when I saw this opportunity for Vuori clearly.
Mm-hmm. And so many of the apparel brands that we know and love today started off that way, right? Like as a small, like whether it was in a garage or just like somewhere small and one or two people like kind of hacking it together. And granted, as many as there are that have succeeded, there's way more that have failed, right? And so I'm just curious in your learnings throughout those early days, what did you learn about what makes an apparel brand successful versus not?
Yeah, I mean, and it was not easy for us. I will share, I jumped in with 2 feet. We were working in a little garage. We were underfunded. We had raised some friends and family money. We were an underdog story, all the way. What I learned through those formative years of starting the business was, number one, product is everything. You have to make a great product. The world there's too many products out there. You've got to have a vision for a brand that is unique. And then you've got to go out and build product that is aligned with the spirit of that brand. And then once you do that, if you make an exceptional product, then you have to go out and make sure you listen to your customers. When we launched, we didn't get it right. Our distribution strategy was flawed. We sold into wholesale, namely into yoga studios and gyms where people were working out and sweating. And we learned that we just weren't getting the type of velocity and the resonance with the product just sitting on a rack. And it wasn't until we pivoted to a direct-to-consumer model and we could build that direct relationship with the customer and we could start asking them questions. What did they like? What didn't they like? How were they wearing the product? Did they resonate with our marketing? I mean, we asked them every question under the sun. And by listening to our customer, we started to adjust how we were speaking to the brand. What we heard loud and clear from our customers was they loved the versatility of the product. They loved it for, they were running in it, they were hiking in it, they were training in it, they were sleeping in it, they were wearing it on the weekends. They were like, this is versatile product for men that we couldn't find. So we started speaking to versatility. And we just started to find that engine of growth, that product, market, message fit. And as we were able to do that, we were able to start define and show our vision for this brand, which, the product didn't exactly look like activewear. And that was the whole purpose of existing. It was a new perspective on the category. We wanted to break down those silos and barriers of what it was supposed to look like for men and do something totally fresh. It was more inspired by our backyard, by our hometown here in Encinitas in Southern California. And that was, we couldn't do that unless we had a direct relationship with the customer. So I would say those were the two things, the main lessons. And there's so many more, but number one, make a great product. Invest your energy, your heart, your soul into making a great product. And number two, develop a great relationship with your customer and listen to them. Listen to them, try new things, take calculated risks, be nimble, institutionalize what works, and move on quickly from what doesn't. But I think that is a really good recipe that'll give you a chance in this business.
Joe, just to kind of delve into that a little deeper too, and connect it to some of those the two businesses that you said in the fashion world that didn't work out, right? I think I don't disagree that product is everything. I do think that that's very important. But I also believe there's a lot of founders and a lot of people that have founded products or whatever, whether it's a physical product or software, whatever the product may be, but they had struggles to have discoverability. They had struggles to sell. They didn't find the right price, right? They didn't find the right audience. For those listening, that have those ideas or are creatives that can develop a really good product, perhaps it's a art company, perhaps it's a shade company, whatever it may be, what did you guys do, whether it was those two failed businesses or now, that connected with the customer?
Well, what I'll share is one of the things I learned from that staffing company that I started was we went into a really crowded space. It was a commoditized market. There was a million people calling people every day selling the same type of thing. And what we did there was we built a community around our business and we had a lot of fun with our customers. And we created an environment where people just wanted to be a part of the club. And so they wanted to do business with us because we were having fun. We were going to Chargers games. We were going to Padres games. We were going to concerts. We were always hosting the best holiday party. We were just bringing people together and sharing in meaningful and memorable experiences. And so, while apparel is a totally different industry. We took a lot of lessons from that. And when we were in our early days, we opened a pop-up and we started bringing people together. And, people weren't going to come together around just buying our product or shopping for our product, but we would partner with like these incredible artists that lived in our community that we were very much inspired by. And we would have art shows in our space, and we would bring in a DJ. We would bring in other brands that were starting up. Like we have friends that were starting breweries. We had friends that were starting little food businesses, and we would invite everybody together. It was like a community event hosted by the community for the community. And we were just a conduit for bringing people together and sharing in these awesome experiences. And before you knew it, it was like people were starting to try our product organically. And originally, our goal wasn't to be a global brand. We just wanted to be meaningful in our hometown. Like we were really thinking about how can we build meaningful products that don't exist for our community. And so it all started there. It was like one customer at a time, thinking about our micro community around where we live. And then it built outward from there. And then we built a model and a recipe for building community that we've been able to replicate now that we have over 50 stores across the country.
Yeah. I want to take it back a little bit and talk about the period of time before you started VEE-YOUR-EE. Because I think, in any entrepreneur's journey, like there's going to be failure or just down moments and down times and dark times that you have to sort of manage your psyche and just like mentally get through. And so leading up to that, you had, I think, you said you had started a couple brand apparel companies and that those hadn't worked out. It was the global financial crisis. I know you had a relationship that also didn't end well. And then you happened to meet someone by chance, I think at a party I heard. And that seemingly changed the trajectory of your life. And so first I want to talk about how you were managing your mental state in those times where things were not working out. You feel like internally you felt like you had to be on this path, but for some reason, just nothing was kind of happening. And then the moment that you met this person and what happened there.
Yeah. I mean, this is a wild story and, sometimes maybe hard for some to believe. But it was my truth. And so I'm happy to share it. Ultimately, like I had mentioned, I was kind of in a rut. I had gone through a divorce, wasn't probably living my best life. And as a result, I wasn't attracting the right partner. I wasn't, finding my purpose in life. And I just felt like I was moving through heavy water and I wasn't fulfilled, like something needed to change. And, I was working on apparel brand number 2. And that apparel brand actually was called VEE-YOUR-EE. It was a totally different business, different product, different everything, but the name was the same. And so interestingly, I'm at this event. I think it was on the 4th of July, and we're at a party, and my friends are all there. We're having a good time. And this woman comes up to me and she just tells me, look, I don't know why, I just need to tell you this. And she's like, you are working on a project right now. It's a business. You have 2 companies. You have one that pays the bills, and then you have one that you desperately want to be your full-time job. It's your passion. And she said, there's something about your life that's very interesting. She's like, you were raised in a very unique way. She goes, but you've largely abandoned those values as you've gotten older. And she says, I'm here to tell you, she's like, for some reason, I have to tell you this. This company you're working on that you want to be successful, she said, it's going to be bigger and more successful than you could ever imagine. And she's like, you're going to be giving talks to thousands and thousands of people about how you built this thing. She goes, but here's the thing. It's not with your current business partner. It's not in its current form exactly. And she goes, and the way that you're going to realize this potential is you need to get back to those values, and you need to make some changes in your life to find more alignment with yourself. And I was just like, at this point, like, you guys, I got to understand, I'm sitting there at a party. My friends are like, what is going on with Joe? And I'm literally crying.
Yeah. That's such a specific thing for her to like want to come to you and tell you, which is like, how did you, thinking back about it, like where do you think she got this information from? Or like, was it just divine intervention? Like, is there any explanation for like why she came up to you and said all these things?
this woman had no idea who I was. She had never we weren't on the map. Like Vuori meant nothing to anybody at this time. And so there was no public information about me. And that's what I'm thinking. I'm like, what, are you a stalker? Like, what is going on here? But no, she went on to explain that she's an intuitive, that she works with, a lot of executives and celebrities and people and just helps to guide them in their life. And she was just like, I just see this so clearly. And she's like, I can't explain it. It's just coming through me. And I need to tell you. So she ended up becoming a close friend of mine, and I did work with her, and, she wasn't a lunatic. She's a very wise woman. And she created so much value for me in my life because, whatever it was that she said, she sparked something within me. And literally the next day, I woke up and I went to my first yoga class. And I just said, I just need to find community that can help me to grow as a human being, people that will support me in evolving myself. And I started going to yoga, and then that led me on a journey to learning about meditation. And that led to about a year period where I almost became like a monk. I wasn't going out on the weekends. I was spending time writing and journaling and getting clear and, continuing to practice yoga and learning about breath work and all of these skills and tools that were like, I now think of these things as like investments in happiness. I was like in a period where I got really intentional about seeking clarity in my life. And that set me on this incredible journey, like I started to follow my curiosities. And instead of feeling pressured to go out to a bar on a weekend, I was spending on time with people in deep thought and like contemplation and thinking about, the world. And like I got surrounded by incredible human beings that became great friends. And the inspiration for this brand that we wanted to create was really born during that time. So I'm just very grateful for that experience that night.
Customers are rushing to your store. Do you have a point of sale system you can trust, or is it a real POS? You need Shopify for retail. Shopify POS is your command center for your retail store. From accepting payments to managing inventory, Shopify has everything you need to sell in person. Get hardware that fits your business. Take payments by smartphone, transform your tablet into a point of sale system, or use Shopify's POS Go mobile device for a battle-tested solution. Plus, Shopify's award-winning help is there to support your success every step of the way. Do retail right with Shopify. Sign up for a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/founderhour. Once again, go to shopify.com/founderhour to take your retail business to the next level today.
So, Joe, I can imagine that a lot of what you're talking about, right, like that investment in happiness, is a very, it requires you to almost be away from others at times, right? Almost to be secluded, to be just so focused on yourself, and not in a selfish way. And if that's what they want to call it, right? Positively selfish. How did you do that, right? Like, I mean, you said you were this guy that went out, partied, had a good time, like had friends, right? I know you were going through a rough patch there, but I feel like the hardest and the most challenging part of being, happy and investing in yourself to be happy is to almost drown out the noise, right? So how did you do that? Like, how practically, how do you do that? Because, I feel like everybody would want to invest in their happiness, but they might be like, how do I do that and still be married? How do I do that and still have kids? How do I do that and still have friends? Right. So I'm just curious how that was like for you.
Yeah. What I am not a proponent for is becoming an isolationist. I'm a huge advocate for friends and community and nurturing relationships. One of our biggest values at Vuori is being in great relationships and investing in community. And so I'm not an advocate for that, but I do think whether it be that time in my life that I was really seeking clarity on my purpose, it was very important to me to create the space to get to know myself. And I think that's really critical in life and in business if you choose a path in entrepreneurship. In the early days, it was a lot of time spent on my yoga mat. It was a lot of time spent in reflection. It was a lot of walks by myself in nature. and it was a lot of thinking, and I'm blessed that like inspiration struck, but I'm not saying that is going to happen for everybody, but I do think that should you choose a path in entrepreneurship, it's really important to stay connected to that place and to develop tools, rituals, habits that continue to cultivate, clarity in your life. Because, a great business is really just a summation of millions of decisions that you make, oftentimes quickly, oftentimes subconsciously. And those decisions build on each other. And great businesses make great decisions. And I think they need to come from a place of clarity. And not only a place of clarity, but a place of alignment with your values. What clarity can provide is like a deep sense of like who you are and what's important to you. When you're going out all the time and you're moving in a linear fashion in your life and you're just burning through the days and you don't take time for reflection or a momentary pause, you can lose touch with like what's truly important to you. What really is going to light you up as a human. And if you're in an entrepreneurial role, like you are the people that people look to. You've got to be fulfilled, like if you want to be in a great relationship with others, your customers, your business, like you need to first be in a great relationship with yourself. And that means being clear on what your values are, living a life in alignment with those values, making decisions from that place. That builds internal equity. It builds momentum. It builds trust, and ultimately it can result in a great business. But I'm a big advocate for, continuing to make those investments. It may not be like lock yourself in a cave for a year, but it might be waking up before the kids do. I have a 7 and a 4-year-old today. I'm married. I still get up before the sunrise. I spend time in reflection. I spend time in meditation. I warm up my body. I have a little ritual. In the evenings, I like to take a moment to just think about the day, just so that things don't just move like a speed blur, and that's what works for me, but it's so important to me to stay connected to friends, stay connected to family, have fun, on the, you got to continue to stay inspired. You got to have fun and enjoy the process. And so, I'm definitely not an advocate for being, isolated and you got to merge with community and friendship.
Yeah, and I think people often don't realize how important timing is to a lot of success in anything. And just to kind of talk about that time again is like right before you start the brand. Now's the time. It's interesting. Like you sort of like pump the brakes and start focusing on yourself more. And through that journey, you sort of collide with this trend that's happening, which is yoga around that time, 2014, 2015, and there's obviously, for women, there's like different brands that they could kind of shop at. But for men, it sounds like there wasn't much out there. And you probably weren't even seeking that at the moment, but it probably came to you because you were sort of on this natural journey of your life. And while also having like, the feelers out there of like, do I see opportunity? But just tell us a little bit about that time and what opportunity you saw and why you thought that would even become a even bigger industry and something that you should be a part of and build within.
Yeah, happy to. When I got into yoga, I started practicing every day. So I was in studios every day. And the question was always like, well, what does a guy wear to yoga? And in Southern California, a lot of guys wore board shorts that were designed for surfing to yoga class. And, they would stretch a little bit, but they would kind of fall down on your hips. They didn't have a lot of support. But people in Southern California wore board shorts largely because they were surfers, beach people. It was like a subculture, So you think about Southern California beach culture, they didn't necessarily resonate with kind of the more urban team sport brands that dominated activewear for men. You think about the Nikes, Under Armour, Adidas. It was like they defined that kind of archetype of what activewear looked like. A lot of surfers and skaters and snowboarders, these kind of more alternative solo sports, they almost like rejected those brands. And so there was almost like this cultural gap that existed in Southern California beach culture. And so I always thought that was really interesting because I grew up very much a jock, very much wearing those brands. But then I moved to Southern California, I started surfing, and I really embraced, surf culture as well. So I was kind of like a hybrid, like I existed in the middle. And so when I got into yoga, I started looking around. I'm like, man, there's so many men practicing yoga, but they don't have a brand to wear. And during this time, Lulu was really just like thriving as a brand, as a women's oriented brand. And they brought this kind of studio to street, like versatility point of view to the category. They were working with better materials, better construction. It was a better product. They charged more for it, and women were paying for it. And it wasn't just yoga participation that was booming in the US. You think about, it was like the rise of studio fitness, the rise of CrossFit. Like when I grew up, you would go to Gold's Gym or 24-hour fitness. You'd wear an old like gym, your like college lacrosse shorts and a cotton tee. You'd work out and you'd get out of there and go home. Like all of a sudden, exercise was becoming this like very community oriented thing. And I think social media was really like helping to propel that, because people were like meeting up for a yoga class or they were going to CrossFit. You were a part of a community. People were documenting their journey online. It was a very social thing. And so all of a sudden, how you appeared and how you dressed, it became like a lifestyle. And when I looked around, the big activewear, the monolithic activewear brands, they were distributed at mass market. They weren't specialty. They were just overlooking this whole movement. And so there wasn't really a lifestyle brand for men that spoke to us authentically. And so that was really the aha moment. That was the opportunity that we saw. It was like, yes, very much rooted in like my participation in yoga, but I was doing a lot of other things to train as well. And so it was really a confluence. It wasn't about being a yoga brand or a running brand. It was about being a versatile, active lifestyle brand, for people that were living this lifestyle, that were investing in their health and their well-being. And we wanted to make really comfortable clothes that would perform and didn't necessarily identify you as a jock or somebody going to the gym. It was product that you could wear across multiple aspects of your life.
I know Vuori is awesome, but don't you guys miss like when everybody would wear like a Harvard t-shirt and when they went to like Cal State Long Beach? I mean, it's a little bit like you should almost bring back like that nostalgic, those brands and just, put it on a better quality shirt.
Yeah.
It's like a Harvard community of people that didn't go to Harvard. Joe, I'm curious, you talked about, your values a lot and, your personal values. I'm curious, what are those values? And also, how has that translated into Vuori's values?
Well, I'm a big believer in investing in your clarity and well-being. We talked a lot about that, but I'm a big believer in the power of the mind. I believe that, well, I don't want to say like happiness is necessarily a choice, but I do believe, I've been doing a lot of work reading. I don't know if you guys have read The Daily Stoic or, Ryan Holiday's book or Meditations with Marcus Aurelius but like I've been fascinated with kind of Stoic philosophy. And a lot of what they're talking about is like the power of the mind, that like our thoughts become our actions, become our habits, become who we are. And so like, like the way that we think is really, really important. And it's malleable. Like we have the power and the ability to, modify who we are through the power of like our thoughts. And so, so I'm a big believer in the power of the mind. I've also always been acutely aware of just how short life is. I think that's maybe one of my biggest blessings and why I chose, in the midst of like a pretty cushy lifestyle to make a big change and take a risk and start an apparel brand, because like, I just believe that we are here for a blink of an eye. And when you really start to come to terms with that and really face that and are at peace with that, it's very empowering because you start to realize like that's not really actually that big of a decision, and it kind of gives you confidence to get up and go. And so those are a couple of the things that are really important to me. I'm a big believer in doing meaningful work, whether like my first job was, unloading water heaters in a garage in Hawaii. It was a summer job. And then I worked at a screen printing shop, folding t-shirts, and cleaning up and vacuuming and sweeping. And I've just always believed that like, it's really important to take really great pride in your work. And, whether it's you're making a product like a garment or, you're working on a spreadsheet or you're sweeping up. I believe that, like your work is really a devotion to yourself. It's a devotion to spirit. And so I'm a big believer in product. I'm also a big believer in being in great relationships, and like for me, culture and people are really at the heart of everything we've done here at Vuori. It's the biggest driver of our success. And so when you think about what we've carried forward, we are a product obsessed company. Our number one value is to make really great product. And then number two, it's being in great relationships, and it's being in great relationships with yourself. We've talked a lot about that. But also being in great relationships with others, with each other. I am this is maybe that metaphysical kind of woo-woo part of me talking, but I really believe that the relationships that we have here within our four walls, the way that we treat each other, have a direct correlation to the experience that people have when they touch our product, even if it's not in our stores. I mean, definitely when it's in our stores, but even if it's on the rack at Nordstrom, I believe that when that customer interacts with our product, they feel the harmony that we have as a company and as a leadership group, as a team here at Vuori. And so we spend a lot of time on like, how do we ask ourselves, how do we create an environment where great human beings want to come, they want to thrive, they want to stay and join us on this vision. And so to me, I would say those are the two really big ones: great product and being in great relationships with ourselves. Like, how can we help our people to be in great relationships with themselves, to invest in happiness for themselves? And then how do we create an environment where they will thrive? And the company isn't just a place where we're extracting resources. I mean, that's the traditional kind of industrial model. It's like, come work for me, you get a paycheck, and we're going to extract your resources. And we're trying to think about something that's a little bit more regenerative. And I am not saying we're perfect. Like, Vuori is a high growth business. It's reaching levels of scale that are very inspiring to us. And it's not easy, it's hard. And so people are here, they're working really hard. But we have a strong vision around our culture, and we try to invest in it deeply.
In those early days, I know you had some experience after the couple apparel brands that you started in terms of like creating clothing and stuff. But how did it get to a point where it started feeling like a real business, right? Like, was there something that happened that, I don't know, early on, if you had to like raise money to sort of get inventory out there, like, were you dealing with any rejection at the time? Like, was it something that started to pick up pretty quickly? Like, tell us a little bit about those early days.
Yeah, I mean, Vuori was not an overnight success. We were in a little garage. We had raised a little friends and family money, and some of our competitors in the market had raised quite a bit of institutional capital. There was Outdoor Voices and Roan, and it felt like a number of others that were kind of launching around the same time, and a lot of them were raising a lot more institutional capital. They were building these boards, and therefore, getting a lot of attention in the media. A lot of brands were heralded as the next Lululemon, and Vuori was not on that list. And so it was hard in those early days. And, like I said, our strategy was to sell into these studios and gyms, and men just weren't sticking around after class to shop. And so we were on a one-way path to running out of business, going out of business and running out of capital. And we hadn't really defined an engine of growth that was investable in it, so we couldn't, like, going back to investors, they were like, okay, well, show us what you've proven. And we hadn't really proven anything. And so it was around that time that we decided to pivot to a direct to consumer strategy. And it was really scary because we didn't have a lot of capital left, but it was early days in advertising on social, and people were building communities on social. And we're like, we need to learn this. Like, we need to go all in on digital marketing and customer acquisition online via social. And so we did that. And it was not the first month, it was really hard. Like, we were barely getting $1 of sales for $1 of spend. We had the wrong messaging. Through that relationship with the customer, we started to evolve our marketing messaging, and we started to find these messages, like, we started to talk about just reflecting back what the customer was telling us they loved about the product. It was versatile. So I remember one day I was sitting on my couch and I pulled up a Photoshop window and I put all the different colors of our athletic shorts that we kind of launched the business with. It's called our core short. They're amazing shorts. And they came in all these fun colors and prints and color blocks. And they were just these amazing shorts. And at the top, I just wrote all the words that I heard in those customer feedback surveys. It was like train, run, surf, hike, travel, chill. And that's still a part of the vernacular of the brand today. But through that direct relationship with the customer, through digital advertising, we were able to try ads like that started to pick up momentum. And all of a sudden, $1 of spend became $2 of sales, and then $3 of sales, and then $4 of sales. And then we could go back to our investors and say, look, we've defined an engine of growth. We are resonating deeply with this customer base. And we were able to raise a little bit more money and just so grateful from that point. We never really had to go back and raise more to build our business.
And on the topic of timing, do you think in that time period, the social advertising landscape was, at a point where it was possible, or not that it's not possible today, but it's obviously a lot more saturated today. Do you think that helped a lot when it came to building the brand initially? Like if it hadn't been that way, would it have been a lot more difficult to have gotten it up to a point where you were able to, raise a big round of funding and continue to invest in the business?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I definitely think so. I think timing is so important. You hit it right on the head. If we started Vuori today, it's a lot more competitive. There's been a lot of brands that have kind of come into the space, and it would just be a lot harder to get the share of voice to reach your audience. It's a lot more expensive. Every brand, large and small, is advertising in those same digital channels. And so, yeah, it's just a completely different landscape. And so I think the timing, it was like the rise of studio fitness and community fitness, the rise of social media, inexpensive advertising. It was easy to reach an audience. People were willing to try niche brands. A lot of those brands turned over because the product wasn't great or they couldn't execute. So it was timing meets preparation and great execution.
Joe, what I love about the whole marketing stuff is, you just kind of kept it simple, right? Like, I think a lot of times people overthink what the customer wants to see or hear. And it's like, especially with scrolling, you've got like 5 seconds to look at something, maybe even less than 5 seconds. You're just going through it. It's like, just keep it simple, right? Like, did you find that that's something that's been consistent now throughout the years of building Vuori? Is that, you've just kind of kept it real, kept it simple and authentic?
We have, I'm a big believer that great brands are built from the inside out, and so I talked about people and relationships and product and culture. Vuori is kind of like a slow fog that's rising across the country. Like we've never asked a celebrity to endorse, our product. We don't pay influencers with these massive followings. We open stores and we build community around the stores. We get out and we build authentic relationships with people. And so, yeah, I mean, it's been a test and learn type of strategy. Like we test things, we institutionalize what works, we invest and double down on what's working, and we move on quickly from what doesn't. And that's what the digital environment has been able to do. So yeah, I would say largely it has been a very simple marketing strategy, but complex and hard to execute. It's very much rooted in real, authentic relationships and showing up and being a part of a community, and that's really helped to build the brand.
So Joe, I know we talk a lot about mindset, obviously, and relationships, and when you raise money for several different businesses, I think, and I assume you're going to friends, family, similar network of people. I think that's the story for a lot of people. How do you keep them coming back, right? Or do you? Like, are people like, Joe, look, man, like, we did this before, it didn't work out. We love you, we wish you the best, but we're gonna sit this one out. I mean, how do you persuade? How do you get them to buy in that, like, this is the time, this one's gonna actually work out?
Well, you're talking to a guy who was going to the market to raise money. I had never had any success in apparel. I had never worked as a designer, never built a successful product really. I had 2 apparel brands that didn't really go anywhere. And even worse, I was an accountant. So like, I had that going against me. People were like, how are you going to be the person that's going to go into this wildly competitive space? Because people didn't see, I would talk about like this niche, this vision for this brand, this SoCal active lifestyle brand. People were just like, you're competing with Nike. They're going to crush you. And that was the point of view. And so everybody at this time, you got to remember, capital was getting cheaper and cheaper. When we first launched the business and we were starting to put the business plan together, this is like in 2013, we were talking to investors. It was impossible. Like I just got rejected constantly. And, I'm very grateful that I was a very subpar male model because I got used to rejection. And that was like, I developed thick skin and I was comfortable just moving through things. And that's another thing I would always say is like, if you're earlier in your career and you want to start a business, like go get a job in sales. Like just go do cold calls for a summer, get rejected day after day, make 200 calls a day. Because like when you develop a relationship with being uncomfortable and developing a relationship with rejection, it becomes very empowering. Because like, no, we do not like, I'm a sensitive guy. I do not like being rejected. But like, I don't today, like no sweat off my back. Like I'm so comfortable with rejection. And you
just become numb to it.
You become numb to it and you just keep picking up the phone. You just keep trying. But I just got rejected so many times. As capital was becoming cheaper and cheaper, interest rates were dropping, there was a lot of money being invested into direct-to-consumer brands. But they all wanted to know that there was some kind of customer acquisition hook, there was some kind of unique tech play, there was some unique cutting out the middleman and going direct-to-consumer. And that wasn't what was true for us. And so we held our ground and we're like, no, we're going to build great product. We're going to embrace a multi-channel strategy. Wholesale will be a part of our business. And we're going to make great product. We're going to build a great culture and we're going to build a brand, kind of the old fashioned way, and it just was not sexy. And so we just got no after no after no. And so to answer your question, like I was not great at raising money. And that's part of the reason we only raised a couple $1 million to build this business until we didn't need money. I mean, once you don't need it, obviously the investors flood in because like they want to be a part of a growth story that doesn't need capital. But when you need it and you're unproven, it's very hard to get somebody to believe, especially in my circumstances. And so it was really, really hard. I don't have a silver bullet here other than just like keep trying, And for me, it was like I maxed out the credit cards. I didn't take a salary for 2 years. I begged friends and family. I just did everything I could. I started in a garage. I never spent money on overhead that was unnecessary. It was a very small, lean team that did a lot of things. And so, we just kind of gritted our teeth and got through it.
Yeah. So speaking of capital and like, all the investors coming at you when you don't really need it anymore. I think it was like 2019, you had raised, I think $45 million or something like that. And then a couple of years later, SoftBank came in with $400 million, which is massive. And like value the company at like $4 billion. Why did you think that, or why did you decide, obviously it's a lot of money, but that shows how big the industry is and obviously how big Vuori's place could be in it. What was the idea behind taking on that much capital and bringing, investors in, and where does that go? Like what is the plan in terms of deploying that capital and like obviously growth, but like, where do you see the future of the space and obviously Vuori going?
Yeah, regarding the investment, it's actually, I think it's confusing for a lot of people because, that was all secondary money. So in 2019, the brand was profitable. And when Norwest came in, the company didn't need capital to grow. We had a working capital model where we could self-fund our growth. And so we didn't have a need for the money. And so, we had investors in 2018. We had investors that came in as early as like late 2013. So they had been in the brand now already for 5 years. And so it was time to give them some liquidity. And so the Norwest round was as a way of getting some return from our early shareholders. So the money didn't come to the company, it went to shareholders. And then when we did the deal with SoftBank, it was the same thing. It was an opportunity to return and provide some liquidity to our early shareholders. So that's what's so unique about our brand is that, in a time when people were raising hundreds of millions of dollars and putting it on their balance sheet and investing in growth, Vuori was doing it all through its own cash flow generation. And so, yeah, it's, a little bit different, but something I'm really proud of. We leaned heavily on great relationships with our vendor base. They gave us great terms and they were great partners, and supporting us on our journey.
Yeah. And so I guess aside from the capital, like where do you see the future in terms of the brand and also the space?
Well, look, I think we are still in very early innings in terms of people investing in their health and their well-being, and it's folks like yourselves who are doing podcasts on mindset and sharing information and sharing tools with the world, and in every single nook and cranny of health and wellness and mindfulness, like there's just so much information. It's like we're on an information superhighway. And I just believe that we are just barely cracking the code in terms of what's possible with human potential and people learning how to live healthier and happier lives. And I think Vuori has a place in adding value to people's lives and helping to be a part of that journey with people. And so I'm very bullish on the category. I'm very bullish in terms of what Vuori is going to be able to accomplish. We're a product-oriented company, so we're investing deeply in innovation. We're bringing our message and bringing our product and brand to global markets now, which is so exciting. And we're going to just keep staying focused on building a world-class team. I'm a big believer. Great businesses are great people that are aligned by a common vision. And so my biggest job is being a cheerleader and a recruiter and bringing world-class talent together. So that's where I'm going to be focused.
Joe, one of the things I'm curious about, I work in real estate, so I'm always curious about the real estate component of businesses. And especially for you, one of the things I've realized about Vuori is wherever we go, and we're based in Southern California, there's a Vuori store, right? Like, and that's something that I think I enjoy seeing because for me, I've always loved touching and feeling my clothing, right? Like, and also just figuring out sizing, like, are you an XL, double XL, large? Like, what are you? Every brand has like their own sizing strategies, I suppose. When did you make the decision that retail was going to be a part of your strategy of your business? Because I think a lot of e-commerce founded brands don't end up there. And how has that done for you guys? And I can imagine as a company focused on community, that's something that played a role. But I'm curious to hear from you how that's going, why it started, and also where you see it going over the next, call it 3 to 5 years.
Yeah, I mean, for the same reasons that you just talked about how hard it is to, grow today in a digital environment because advertising is so competitive. I mean, advertising digitally now is as competitive as advertising on television was, years ago before the kind of .com revolution. And so it's expensive to build a brand direct to consumer if you don't have a celebrity or somebody that really can cut through. The retail business is really unique. It's not for everybody. It's not easy. You have to have the right assortment and the right number of customer choices and SKUs and all of those types of things. But the retail business is a beautiful one. And, for us, it almost fell in our lap. In our second year of business, one of our investors bought a building. He owned a bank and he was going to tear down this old furniture consignment store. It was on the Coast Highway, right on the 101 in our little hometown in Encinitas. And it was like a 3,000 square foot space and it was pretty beat up. But we went in there and with like a $5,000 investment, we did all the work ourselves and we converted this old consignment furniture space into the coolest little zone where we had a third of it was our office, a third of it we turned into an art gallery. It was literally just plywood walls. And then a third of it was like, our best job at merchandising a retail store. And this was a building that's eventually going to get teared down. He just said, look, you guys can use it for a year if you want. And we're like, yeah, let's jump in. We'll office out of it. We'll use it as an event center. We'll start bringing community together. And that was how we learned retail. Like none of us had a retail background. We didn't know how to merchandise and sell product, but we're like, this is a great opportunity to learn. And the beauty of it was our office was right there on premise. And so we could listen to the customers through the wall, literally talking to our sales associates, asking questions. We started to understand like the behavior just by being there and listening as a fly on the wall. And then again, it provided an opportunity to bring community together. And so we were like, okay, we can do this in our backyard. We turned that store into a profitable store. Like, we're like, let's see if we can do this outside of our backyard. And so we went up to Manhattan Beach and we opened a little pop-up. It was a 1-year pop-up. Again, did all the work ourselves, minimal investment, but we started hosting events and bringing people together. And before you know it, we started to see some momentum in Manhattan Beach. And then we're like, let's go up to the Bay Area and see if we can do it there. We opened in the Marina District in San Francisco, a tiny little store, and did the same thing. And it became this repeatable model. Those early first gen stores, I mean, they're almost embarrassing. Like, you know, the fixtures were all just like, you know, gas pipe that we would buy from Home Depot, and, you know, like plywood that we would buy from Home Depot, and we would stain them, do all the work. But they had a vibe. I mean, there was an energy. We put so much love and heart and soul into it, and people could feel it when they shopped with us. And so, you know, today we have professional fixtures that, you know, we are more designed to scale across the country. But so many of those early lessons that we learned from stores 1, 2, 3 are brought forth in every store that we open. And you named it. It was like how to build community, how to show up and be a part of a community, not just open your doors and expect people to walk in. And so, yeah, we've learned so much from just learning how to do retail and how to build community from our backyard.
Yeah, that's awesome. Joe, I'm curious, you know, as Vuori's grown and continues to grow, one of the things that's obvious as a customer, I'm wearing the core shorts right now, and I love everything else about it, about all the other products too. How do you maintain that higher quality as you scale, as you grow, as the retail stores grow? Because one of the things I've recognized in fashion and even food, you know, as it scales, as it becomes more quote unquote commercial. I was having Mendocino Farms today, and I thought about this. I was like, it used to be great, and now it's like just like corporate salad that sucks. But you know, how do you maintain that quality?
You know, it's a never-ending journey, is what I will say. And you know, when you start, you're not going to get brought into the best factories in the world unless you have a huge, you know, background, a lot of experience, and a lot of great relationships in the space, and you've been doing this your whole career. But the big factories, the ones that deliver the best product, they tend to not choose you when you're small because you just don't have enough volume for them. And you don't even have the internal resources to manage the product development cycle in the way that you kind of need to be successful in working with these big factories. And so you go through a phase where you start with a really small factory that does really good work, but then they can't keep up with demand as you grow. So you need to move that production now to a different factory. So you need to make sure that like your all of your materials, all the inputs are owned by you, meaning you're nominating, you're working directly with a textile mill, you're directly working with the trim supplier. You know, a lot of companies when they're in their early days, the factory manages all that. They choose the draw cord, they choose the fabric. So you approve them, but like they control the supply chain. You know, as you grow, it's so important that you control that because you need to make sure that you know exactly, there's ultimate transparency in where everything's being made. The quality is up to par. They're Blue Sign certified, so they're not like dumping toxic chemicals into lakes and rivers. You know, you need to really own and control your supply chain. So that's a journey. You know, as you hire more people, you build your internal capabilities, and as your brand becomes more notable, and you know, the bigger factories will start to give you a chance, and you can move bigger programs into these bigger factories. And again, you invest in resources to oversee production. But yeah, it's a never-ending journey, and there's no finish line. You can never take your eye off the ball, and it's really about a culture. It's about building an internal culture oriented around making great product.
For sure. Well, Joe, appreciate you being here and you know, sharing your story and all this wisdom with us, and all the best, you know, moving forward with you and Vuori, and we're excited to see, you know, where it goes from here.
Awesome, you guys. Thank you so much. I really enjoyed the conversation. Thank you for having me.
Likewise. Thank you.